I believe our paradigm has to become not an industrial paradigm, but an organic paradigm. You know, you go to the supermarket and you buy that organic banana or apple or whatever it is. Okay, what does organic mean? Pure, but also it means we're organic. It means we're living, growing. It's not as easy, it's not as controlled, but it has lots of possibilities. So we need an organic paradigm. And it's got great parts to it, and it's got parts we don't like so much. But it's fundamental, at the heart of it, it's a paradigm that is adaptable, that changes. There's not one solution. It's not a factory. So to try and explain this to you, I've identified a set of principles and then what I call digital pedagogies that we can use. And these are the principles I believe an organic paradigm has to work on. This is all now from my PhD, and I've tried to take the 4 years of work and summarize into about 3 slides and then really make it simple. So if it's not simple, just tell me and we'll answer. Right, so the first thing we need to understand, I love this quote from Habermas: the formation of power and the formation of knowledge compose an indissoluble unity. You cannot separate power and learning. You want to know what's happening right now? There is a power dynamic. This room creates a power dynamic because you're there, I'm here, and I know exactly how it feels. Because just now I'm going to say any questions, and most people, like my students, are going to know. However, if you were standing here and I was sitting there and you said any questions, I'd probably go, no. This is a power. The rooms have what are called affordances. They afford certain types of conversations. If we were sitting in a circle under an oak tree and I said any questions, no problem, the power changes. There's always a power relationship in discussions. So power and learning are linked. And that's very important that we understand that, because that impacts our principles. So our principles of this new style of learning have to understand that there's a power side to it and there is a learning side to it. When it comes to the power side, there is a change. And I'm talking about when we're using digital now. If we're going to use a digital pedagogy, a digital approach, it is not teacher-centric, it's learner-centric. This is the first big shock for us all. I know I'm a lecturer. Lecturer, what does that mean? I lecture and you listen. It's just like one way. When it becomes learner-centric, the whole thing changes. We actually have to hand power across. If you're not prepared to hand any power across to them, it cannot become learner-centric. I just sent to those of you on my mailing list, I sent out a thing about blended learning. We know about blended, you've heard about blended. It's not blended teaching, it's blended learning. So it's a switch. This is an interesting one. We tend to, in life, have 2 ways in which we operate. Autocracy, typically in classrooms. I'm the king or the queen, and you are my serf, and you will listen. Democracy, okay guys, we can vote. Well, what I identified in my PhD is we had a system, what I called homeocracy, because it's organic. You know, if you know about homeostasis, things adapt to the environment, and that was fascinating. It was scary, and Ibrahim was one of the students back there. But when we looked at how things were happening, they tried to create votes, polls, democracy. We want to do X. Who wants to vote? Typical online environment, no one votes. Like, oh man. So what did they do? They would make the change that they were trying to get the vote on. And if no one moaned, the change stayed. If someone complained, the change was retracted. And so it was a state of homeostasis. People would make moves, work, adapt, change, pull back. It's not how we're used to operating. It's different. You suddenly feel a little bit scared, but it's a different way of power. And then when it comes to learning, the 2 key principles in learning. The first is retrospective meaning. Now this is something that us as teachers are not very good at. We have prospective meaning. So when I want something, I want you to understand. A will lead to B, will lead to C. Got it? Everyone goes, yeah. Retrospective is I throw out a whole lot of stuff, then everyone's like, well, yeah. I don't know what you're talking about. I'll show you an example just now. But afterwards, they go, I get it. You see, it's not as controlled. It's not a simple script from A to B to C. It's A-Z-E-R-P-K. And you go, C, or whatever it is. And that's an important principle. And the 4th one is vulnerability and validation. If you think about it, you can never really learn anything unless you make yourself vulnerable. You can have a PhD in nuclear physics, and I say to you, do you want to learn to water ski? And you go, okay. Well, you're going to look like an idiot. I don't care how clever you are, but you're going to fall on the floor and you go, man. But unless you look like an idiot, unless you fall down, unless you're prepared to be made a fool of and vulnerable, you won't learn. If you say, no, I'm okay, you're not going to. And that's why adults often find it so hard to learn. And so the same comes with any learning. If we're not prepared to make ourselves vulnerable, we can't receive validation because validation starts to concretize what we're learning. But in an environment like this, who wants to be made vulnerable? You're like, okay, who knows the answer to this? You go, oh no, embarrassing. Digital gives us an opportunity to allow our pupils to make themselves vulnerable because it's not as threatening. It's disconnected. In fact, they can even be anonymous. And so we need to make use of that concept of vulnerability and validation because it opens up the opportunities for learning.